Hello and welcome to Piton Noire Dominica Writers Festival Workshop. I am Simone Mathieu and I will be the host for this event this evening. Today we are very happy to have Piton Noire with us, and they will be presenting on the topic of showing and not telling. So we are very happy to have the group with us, and as a matter of fact, let's do a gallery view so we can see everyone who is joining us today. And of course, they will go ahead and introduce themselves in just a minute, but I thought we could begin with Miss Nicole Georges-Bennett as she introduces herself as well as introduces the group in general. So Nicole, hi, how are you?
Hi, Simone. Thank you so much for being our facilitator today. We're very excited to be here and to tell you a little bit about Piton Noire. So Piton Noire is a science fiction fantasy writers collective. We are the publishers of the Flying Crapaud Anthology, and we are about a year old. And what we do is we write in the genres of science fiction and fantasy from a Caribbean context or from a Caribbean perspective. So we're really excited. This is our first workshop ever. Yay! And we are going to be talking about what it means to show and not tell in creative writing. If you are not someone who's ever done any creative writing, you're probably wondering, well, what the heck is that? So, stick around. We're going to get into that. It is my pleasure to turn the floor over to some of our guests and our writers, fellow writers, who are also members of the group. I'm actually going to start with our editor, the editor of the Flying Crapaud, who is Kristopher Noseworthy, and he's also one of our facilitators for this afternoon session. So Chris, tell the people all about you.
Hi, my name is Kristopher Noseworthy. I was the editor at the Flying Crapaud. I have a lot of experience editing science fiction, non-science fiction, academic texts. I work at a university, and for a long time I taught editing and taught writers how to improve their writing. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy doing, and it's an instinct, but it's something you can develop for yourself, and that's one of the things that I try to encourage in the people that I work with. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. So let's keep the introductions going, and we will go over to Mr. Levy. If you can introduce yourself, please.
My name is Jeffrey Levy. I am based in South Florida. I have a few short stories under my belt. My claim to fame is science fiction novel called The Silver Spoon Effect. Right now, I am doing a lot less fiction work and a lot more, I guess, technical writing, publishing in journals. So trying to find the time to do more fiction once again, because now it's really tough to get in the writing.
Yes. So thank you for being here. And then we go over to Mr. Sam George. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, it is a pleasure to be with you guys. My first and also my first writers workshop. So, my first published work, I could say, is in the Flying Crapaud, and it's actually the first story in the Flying Crapaud. Thanks, Kristopher, for recommending that be the first story, by the way. And of course, I am also one of the writers of the radio drama series, Redemption Road. Mm-hmm. So I guess with those two things, I don't know if I can call myself a writer yet, but
sure you
can.
I mean, I have tons of things that I've written, most of it on my on a hard drive there. I have either not finished or sort of forgotten about them. But now with everything that's happening, I'm beginning to spend more time on those and revisiting some of them, reworking some of them. And I hope the new one that I'm working on now, which is for the Flying Crapaud 2, you'll find it fun and interesting, because it's a twist on one of the stories we grew up with to make it sort of sci-fi. So we'll see.
Yes, excellent. So wonderful meeting everyone, and thank you for being here as we present this workshop to the Dominica's Writers Festival for 2021. So as we get started, I want to go ahead and present a video that will kind of put into perspective what we will be discussing today. So let's make sure that the audio part is on, because that is the tricky part, I'm told. So here we go, and let me know if you can hear.
We read fiction for many reasons. To be entertained, to find out whodunit, to travel to strange new planets, to be scared, to laugh, to cry, to think, to feel, to be so absorbed that for a while we forget where we are. So how about writing fiction? How do you suck your readers into your stories? With an exciting plot? Maybe. Fascinating characters? Probably. Beautiful language? Perhaps. Billy's legs are noodles. The ends of her hair are poison needles. Her tongue is a bristly sponge, and her eyes are bags of bleach. Did that description almost make you feel as queasy as Billy? We grasp that Billy's legs aren't actually noodles. To Billy, they feel as limp as cooked noodles. It's an implied comparison, a metaphor. So why not simply write it like this? Billy feels nauseated and weak. Chances are, the second description wasn't as vivid to you as the first. The point of fiction is to cast a spell, a momentary illusion that you are living in the world of the story. Fiction engages the senses, helps us create vivid mental simulacra of the experiences the characters are having. Stage and screen engage some of our senses directly. We see and hear the interactions of the characters and the setting. But with prose fiction, all you have is static symbols on a contrasting background. If you describe the story in matter-of-fact, non-tactile language, the spell risks being a weak one. Your reader may not get much beyond interpreting the squiggles. She will understand what Billy feels like, but she won't feel what Billy feels. She'll be reading, not immersed in the world of the story, discovering the truths of Billy's life at the same time that Billy herself does. Fiction plays with our senses: taste, smell, touch, hearing, sight, and the sense of motion. It also plays with our ability to abstract and make complex associations. Look at the following sentence. The world was ghost quiet, except for the crack of sails and the burbling of water against hull. The words quiet, crack, and burbling engage the sense of hearing. Notice that Bacall doesn't use the generic word, sound. Each word he chooses evokes a particular quality of sound. Then, like an artist laying on washes of color to give the sense of texture to a painting, he adds another layer, motion, the crack of sails, and touch, the burbling of water against hull. Finally, he gives us an abstract connection by linking the word quiet with the word ghost. Not quiet as a ghost, which would put a distancing layer of simile between the reader and the experience. Instead, Bacall creates the metaphor ghost quiet for an implied rather than overt comparison. Writers are always told to avoid cliches because there's very little engagement for the reader in an overused image such as red as a rose, but give them love began on a beach. It began that day when Jacob saw Annette in her stewed cherry dress, and their brains engage in the absorbing task of figuring out what a stewed cherry dress is like. Suddenly, they're on a beach about to fall in love. They're experiencing the story at both a visceral and a conceptual level, meeting the writer halfway in the imaginative play of creating a dynamic world of the senses. So when you write, use well-chosen words to engage sound, sight, taste, touch, smell, and movement. Then create unexpected connotations among your story elements and set your readers' brushfire imaginations alight.
that was a good introduction. Unfortunately, someone's dog was barking in the background, so we do we do apologize for the barking dog in the background, and I'm not sure who has the dog, but it would be wonderful if we could quiet the dog for the rest of the presentation. So Chris, what did you think of the video?
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Nalo about 25 years ago. So it was a pleasure to hear her lesson again. It's something that she's been working actively on for a long time. So I wanted to get some feedback from the group as to what their initial impressions were and what they took from it. Nicole or Sam, you would like to go?
Sure. Well, first of all, I appreciate the video or her lesson because it seems to show a way of not only making your writing simple, but also interesting. So using metaphoric type language can help you paint the picture without using so many words. Your reader doesn't have to go through a sentence with 10 words in order to get to your point. I think that's kind of what I took from it.
And I think for me, it's a challenge because, you know, coming from a journalist background, you know, Kristopher, we're taught to be very precise with language, right? So there isn't a lot of room for metaphors and similes. You're just supposed to deliver the facts. That's so I think it's a real challenge for me to transition into the type of metaphors that they're describing in the video, but I really see what a difference it can make to, I guess, just the vividness of the scene and just being able to help your reader to picture, you know, what's happening, what's the setting, who the characters are, using all of this type of language. So I'm really fascinated to learn more.
Okay, and any other comments on the video?
Well, I think it's always refreshing to go back to the basics. Even with me now, because I have kind of switched to a different kind of writing, I sometimes forget what pure fiction or true fiction feels like. So I appreciate these refresher courses.
I think I'm going to correct you, and I'm going to do it very gently, but I think that there is no such thing as true fiction or a specific style. I think that you can compare people like Tolkien or Hemingway. They both wrote fiction. It could all be considered fantastical, but they did it in very, very different ways. So I believe that a journalism background or a technical writing background or even just a diary that you keep yourself can be a true representation of a reality. And I think that's what you're looking for. One of the things that Nalo emphasized was the senses. And I think that's something we tend to forget. We are very visual creatures. We love seeing things. We love experiencing things. And it's all about getting the translation of that experience, that physical experience, onto the page. One of the ways, she's got a quote that I liked. She's like, the point of fiction is to cast a spell, which I thought was particularly relevant for our little group.
So too.
A momentary illusion that you are living in the world of the story. I'm currently writing something that takes place in the winter. It completely by accident that it was set in the winter. I'm talking a lot about snow. And I realize that's a very Canadian thing to do. But there's a lot of sound and there's a lot of texture and there's a lot of physicality around snow. And so I have to often take what I want my character to do and put myself in that position. And I was wondering if anybody else had techniques that they used to evoke the senses in their writing.
Well, my reader a lot. So I put myself in my reader's place.
Mhm.
Like I'm not the one writing. And I try to, you know, make them see the word that I'm writing or whatever, whether it's one paragraph or a whole book. I always want the reader to sort of put themselves and say, you know, like for example, when writing about Dominica, I want the reader to, even if they're not from Dominica, I want them to picture the beauty of the island, or for whatever it is that I'm focused on.
Not hearing anything.
To say, oh, hey, you know what? I want to go there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that the video was absolutely a wonderful introduction into the topic. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about the importance of being able to show rather than tell by just engaging our senses. So Chris, you have some more information you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so I'm just going to call up a presentation that I prepared. Let me just share my screen. Apologize. Everything's always seem a little awkward.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get into presentation mode. The red squiggles are just because my computer's default language is French. So there are 7 points on the screen that are ways that you can notice if you are telling something rather than showing something. So expressions like "it was obvious." If you find yourself writing things like "it was clear to Nicole that he was in pain," well, you're making a conclusion based on evidence that the reader doesn't have. And so you're telling rather than...
You're guilty,
Give
Nicole.
up.
Yeah, I'm choosing Nicole because we've known each other for a day or two. And
and I'm very guilty too. I mean, I'm looking at this list and it's kind of like indictments against the type of writing that I do.
What do you mean, Nicole?
Yeah, I use a lot of those type of, I guess, cliche phrases. You know, it was clear, it was obvious. You know, one could tell, that type of thing. So yeah, I am guilty of employing said thingy, drawing conclusions.
Not to put you on the spot, but where do you think that comes from?
Probably from the type of material I used to read as a child growing up, and maybe that type of writing was more acceptable, you know, in the 1970s and 1980s. So of course you pick up a lot of what you used to read and then you reproduce it. So, but you know, the language is fluid and it evolves, and there are probably better ways to express a sentence. So yeah, so I have picked up a lot of those type of cliche, I guess, tropes. So
yeah,
so good to know.
Another element to watch out for is vague abstract language, and this one's hard to detect. But like the example I have here is vital signs versus talking about somebody's breath or their heartbeat. Vital signs are vague. If you're not a doctor, you don't know what that means. But I know I can look at somebody's breathing and tell whether or not they're alive, or if they're excited, or if they're in distress of any kind. And that's the subtle translation that you would need to do in order to make that more showing rather than telling. So we're going to skip past that. The next two, adverbs. Oh, who likes adverbs? Why do you think adverbs might be a problem? Trick question, eh?
Yes, they're overly descriptive. Well, I guess they're overly showy, more or less, and too brief. They don't really they don't stretch things out. They just give you the brief version of what could have been shown better.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. They do tell you exactly what it was. They don't let the reader create that image in their mind. And again, we're going to keep coming back to that. We want the reader to be able to build that in their own mind. So If I just say he did that nervously, okay, he was nervous. But if I mention that he was biting his nails while he was talking, that's a whole different scenario, and it's much more physical, and it evokes a lot. Passive verbs, we'll get back to that, I think. Specifically naming emotions is always a difficult one, because we want to say it, and sometimes it's necessary to, well, he said it angrily, but if he shouted, that's a better word. You don't shout if you're happy, right?
Oh, yeah, we are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think Sharon just joined us, but I'll mute her for a minute while we continue.
Okay. All right. So when are you showing? You're using strong verbs. Don't use walk. Use things like gallop, skip, saunter, stroll, whatever. You're going to, everyone's covering me here. Okay. You're going to use specific nouns and clear adjectives. So don't just tell us that Grandma baked a pie. Say it's a cinnamon apple pie with a golden crust rested on the windowsill above the sink full of dishes. I don't know. There's all sorts of ways to evoke that kitchen and that food that is important. Sensory details comes back to the smells, the taste, the sounds. And then we get back to dialogue is an important way to show rather than tell, because if somebody's saying something, then the way those words are written allow you to interpret what was said.
And if I can just chime in real quick, Chris, most of us here from the Caribbean, so just let me know if you've had that experience, because most of us back at home, we write in these very long and complicated sentences. But once we move over to North America, we have to truncate our sentences. So has that been a challenge for any of you as writers?
Definitely. For me, that's something I really struggle with, trying to shorten my sentences. Like I said on the first video, it made me realize that, okay, so instead of, you can use a metaphor to describe a certain activity or action, that helps you to truncate your sentence. Back in the Caribbean, we do not use metaphorical language a lot. We tend to write facts as it is, as it happened. So leaving away, and even before, beginning to write, like writing some of the stories on the Dominican or so forth, I try to truncate, try to write so North Americans can read and understand what it is we are talking about.
Yeah, I think we all got into a lot of problems when we came up here and realized that all those long, complicated sentences were simply not acceptable. They kept calling them run-on sentences, and I'm like, what are you talking about? That's how we write. So I just said I would chime that in. I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, and that's an excellent point. I was sort of hinting at that earlier with Nicole, because the influence of British English in the Caribbean is much stronger than it is in North America.
Right.
And that's a stronger tendency in British English. And it's something that I'm used to. My family's from Newfoundland. We have a stronger British influence as well. So I'm used to self-editing as I go, so that I don't overwhelm my reader or my conversational partner with things that they don't understand.
Right.
So I guess the question then becomes, when is there too much description? Because you want to create a scene and you want to fulfill all of the senses, right? Fulfill you want to be able to address all of the senses, but can it get too heavy with the description?
That's a good question.
I would imagine that must be a challenge. Anybody?
I mean, yeah, it certainly can. I mean, too much of anything is not good for nothing. Yeah, I've seen some writing, and I mean, it strikes me as being electrically sweet. You know, it's just dripping with with calories, high calories.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when, as a child, especially, and you know, I want to get to the action of the story. I would just jump through most of the descriptions of the settings.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, like because it did feel I understood what the author was trying to do, but you kind of felt like some of that stuff could have been summarized, right? You know, rather than going on about what a character was wearing and how they looked and what they were eating, and you know, and then there's dialogue, and you can see that there's dialogue where the action is, but you have to kind of wade through 2 and 3 paragraphs of, you know, this description. So I think like there has to be a balance for sure.
Yeah, and if anyone is just tuning into this program, this is Piton Noire's presentation of Showing Not Telling, and this is a presentation for the Dominica's Writers Festival 2021 in Dominica. So we're so happy that you're joining us here today, and Sharon joined us a little bit late, so I just wanted her to introduce herself real quick as we continue our conversation. Sharon, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi,
My name is Sharon Dorival from Colliho, the newest member at Piton Noire, and some other writers group, you know, Dala. I enjoy writing. And I want to comment back to what Nicole was saying, because with Prison Press, my last book, Longer to Take on the Bully, I truncate. And then they sent me back to write and add description. They wanted more details. So you see, we have like an issue sometimes, like we can summarize, but then they want more. So what do you do in that case, Chris?
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Excellent. And it was something that I actually struggled with in the last collection. I was often emailing Nicole going, okay, they mentioned this. I don't know what it means. Can you please explain it to me? And it was something where I required, because I don't have the same cultural context as most of the members of the group, so I needed more description in order to understand. And so I think keeping your audience in mind is important. And it's a balancing act, because who are you writing for? Are you writing for a Caribbean-centric audience, or are you writing for a more generalized North American audience? And I think that will help you orient your level of description, because if it's specific to the Caribbean, then if you're talking more generally, you're going to need to explain a bit more of the context of what this succulent is going to do, or how this particular boogeyman is going to rip off the skin of some sort of poor innocent child wandering around in the river. But if you find that you're talking about, I don't know, the description of a jungle, well, unless it's important what particular plants are in that jungle, then you can probably strip back a little bit of that description. So there's no magic bullet, Sharon.
Yeah, so all very important information, and you know the time is speeding along. So I was wondering, Chris, if you can show us more examples of what to do and what not to do on our topic today.
Sure. Let me just get to the proper page. Let's see.
Sharon, did you want to add something else while he's doing so?
I was saying, because what they asked me to do, I try to write in our dialect, Dominican dialect, but the Canadians say, no, we need to write proper English. So I end up with proper English, but they wanted Dominican details, like for the environment and like all the fighting and all that. So like I had a fight. I'm like, oh my God, if I say exactly how we talk, like he got in your, you know what it is. That's not right for kids, right? But it turned out pretty good. Like it's just confusing, you know, Simone, like what do you do? How do you summarize?
How do you balance it?
How do you balance it?
Yeah.
I have a question. So thank you, Sharon. But I guess my question is it always wrong to say, to use the adverbs? You know, is it?
Nope. You can never say always.
Okay.
You have to use them sparingly so that they have effect. If they pepper your writing, if they're all over the place, then they lose effect. If you rely more on description and occasionally throw in an adverb to speed things along a little bit, that will do what you need it to do without adding too much weight to the text. And Sharon, I think you brought up an excellent point about dialect. I think that's something that's really, really helps characterize the area, the place, the setting, the culture. And I think that's something we want to make sure we transmit as culture through writing. And dialect, unfortunately, if you don't have the ear for what's on the page already, makes it very difficult to interpret. And because you can, I mean, we've all seen poor Irish accents written on the page, and you're like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. I don't, and it pulls away from the story. You're immersed in that accent, and so for you, it doesn't pull from the story. So there's a balancing act between how you do dialect in a story. Ironically, not ironically, wonderfully, Nalo Hopkinson does this very well because she's grown up in Canada with Caribbean roots. She's invented her own dialects in her writing so that it evokes the place, but there's still that standard English thread that goes through so that you don't pull the reader from your world, which is the thing that the video talked about a lot, was making sure that your reader is immersed.
Yes.
And if you throw too much dialect, then it could pull that reader from the story.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to exactly what you were saying, Chris, knowing your audience. So who are you writing this for? Because of course, Sharon, if you're writing for a strictly Dominican audience who can identify with the information, then certainly you can immerse yourself in the dialect. But if you're writing for more of a North American audience, then chances are they're simply not going to understand what you're referring to.
Yeah.
So it depends on your audience, I would think, if I might chime in.
Absolutely.
But like what I find with writing now, we can just stick to dialect if we want to take our work international. But yes, we want to involve our culture. We want to share that culture. But yeah, when we send it out to the big publishers, it's like they don't understand it, and it's like it's a no to them because they go by the English that they know, the grammatical structure of English writing. You know, that's what it is.
Yeah, so we certainly see the challenges that we face as Caribbean authors. Yes.
Know your publisher and know your audience is, I suppose. But let me ask this: doesn't writing with description, can that not make you end up writing too long sentences, or sentences that are too long rather? So
yeah, because that's what we're talking about.
Sorry, Simone. I think it goes back to what you were saying, Chris, about balancing your writing. And I guess that's why you need a good editor as well to help you. You know, otherwise you can wind up, you know, hurting yourself and losing your readers, because if they read the first paragraph and then they go down to the second paragraph and it's not, they're like, what is this person talking about? They put your book down, or they stop reading your story. So I guess, yeah, I think that's why workshops like this are important.
Absolutely.
It's
That's correct. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think certain things like balancing and tone, they are hard for the actual author to detect. So somebody on the outside is probably better at trying to spot those, I guess, quote mistakes.
Yeah.
The overindulgences. And I think as science fiction, speculative fiction, fantasy writers, it's a particular pitfall that we can get into because we have to explain so much more of what's going on.
Yeah.
What is it? If you call it a lizard bus, is it a bus that's made out of lizards, or is it a lizard that you ride like a bus? You have to explain that, and then just you get into details that could just overwhelm your reader. So it's something you have to pay even more attention to.
Absolutely. So Chris, I think you were about to show us more examples of how to show.
Right. Okay, I'll share my screen.
Sure.
There we go. So these are some general rules of thumb about showing versus telling. So if you have a pivotal scene, a climactic moment, you're going to show something. Whereas information that is important but doesn't advance the plot, and I think that's where plotting can come in handy, you might want to just summarize that and tell, okay? So if we want to bring the reader into the scene, if it's again in a pivotal moment, then we will do the showing and add more detail. But we're going to skip over less dramatic scenes with less important moments. Like, I don't want to see my character, you know, do the 3-day journey the whole way. I don't need that description. It's not important. I need to know who does it, but I don't need to know how he did it necessarily. Moments of conflict, drama, or crisis, and dialogue. Of course, you're going to want to put as much richness around that as you can. Exposition, other basic information, you don't want necessarily to go into your detail on that. So you have to have an idea of what's going to advance your plot and what's not going to advance your plot. And that will help you balance the showing versus the telling. And I think this is where the cultural elements can come in. We can do a lot more telling about the cultural backgrounds, because that's not necessarily plot-related information. Does anybody have any comments about that?
Any comments from anyone on that?
So I'm assuming when you said show, you mean to talk in a descriptive format. If you have no picture, then that's what showing is about. Is that, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any comments?
Okay, so I will move on. So I have an example here from 1984 that talks, that has a good, it's a good example of showing. And I mean, we can look at it and read it ourselves, but there's some very descriptive language that I would like to highlight. Inconceivable folly, okay? So this is a very lovely turn of phrase, and it really emphasizes his inability to look at her. With hands locked together, invisible among the oppressive bodies, they stared steadily in front of them. Their eyes, instead of the eyes of the girl, the eyes of the aged prisoner gazed mournfully at Winston out of the nests of hair. I loved the image of the nests of hair. It's a crowd, and so he's slightly taller than the rest from the description, and that's what he's seeing. And so, I mean, part of it is in the story, there's a lot of animal-related imagery, and it's coming back through the writing. So this is where your motifs can come out, is in this level of descriptive language. If I want to use blue as a motif for this character, then I can use a lot of blue-related words to describe what's going on for this character in the story.
Yeah, so I think something like this is particularly helpful, especially for newer authors who struggle with just how to put the words together, because there's also almost like a singing aspect when you get the words together perfectly. Anybody else has the sense of just being able to put those words kind of like a melody together? It comes naturally. It's something that builds over time.
I think you're right. I think there's a rhythm to writing, and when you are able to do it well, it ebbs, and flows. And I think that you are sort of rolling along this wave with the author, and you're able to immerse yourself, as the video talks about, in the setting. I mean, I think this particular passage is so interesting, and although Inconceivable Folly is, as Chris said, really an interesting turn, to me, the part that struck me was where it talks about the eyes of the aged prisoner gazed mournfully. Now, as much as perhaps the prisoner is not the main character here, or protagonist or antagonist, I'm not sure, but I learned so much about this person in that one phrase. Right. And instead of saying it was an old man who was very sad, and, instead of doing that, he just captures that person's whole personality and, I guess whatever it is they're going through in that one sentence. So that's really what struck me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
I agree with that
Chris.
conclusion, they call it, that sentence, tells you, well, yeah, you could have described that person from the time they went to prison or how long they've been in prison, the age and all of that. And, the writer could have done that, but they didn't. Just that one sentence says how old the person is, at an older person, and, they're remorseful or mournful, whatever the case may be, whatever the story is trying to say. But yeah, they could have gone through a whole long story to describe that one person. So I think there is a lot of value in that one example. Thanks, Chris.
And of course, it takes a lot of practice. So of course, our time is speeding along, and I want to thank you again, Piton Noire, for being here with us to present on this very important topic. So as we get ready to wind down, and again, Chris, thank you for your expertise and for leading the discussion on these topics. And of course, thank you everyone for your contribution to this presentation. So as we get ready to wind up, do you have any final thoughts for us as we end the program?
I'm sorry.
Someone?
I missed the end of the question, sorry.
Final thoughts.
Oh. I guess for me, I'm very conscious that I'm working with writers that have a different cultural background than I do. And I appreciate that and I love that. And I want to see that in the writing. And I know that regardless of who you're writing for, they will appreciate that cultural background. And if they don't, who cares anyway? So I want you not to change who you are in order to fit into what you think the world wants. It's a bit grandiose a statement, but it's something that I think that you write what you want because there are people like you who want to read it. So you can work on perfecting what you do, and of course we all do that, but make sure that you stay true to the essence of who you are. If you are not a flowery writer, then don't do that. If you like writing long convoluted sentences, great, rein it in just a little bit, but don't change who you are just because you think that it's not going to sell, because half of the books that we read in school were never going to sell anyway, but someone picked them up and now they're stuff that we all have to read. So that's just my my final thought on that, I think.
Yes, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I just wanted to say that I've really found this session to be very helpful, and I hope that our audience has as well. And I would love to invite Chris back to help continue to guide us along this process. And I think that hopefully everybody kind of walks away with a better understanding of what it means to show and not tell. I know for myself, that's something I'm definitely going to work on and try to engage all of the senses in my writing. So that's my takeaway from this is remember to let your audience, let your readers feel what your characters are feeling and to sense that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon, Sam, anyone else?
I would add that or say that this was a very interesting experience or session. What I think it tells me is that it comes with practice. Perfecting your writing, if there is such a thing, comes with practice, like everything else. You have to do it every day. You have to look at your work every day, go over it, and maybe compare it to some of your favorite writers, see how they did it. And I think that will put you on the path as to where you want to go. And of course, we never try to copy people's style, but, like Chris said, and I agree, be yourself. And maybe that will reflect in your writing.
I think it was quite enlightening, and I'm definitely going to practice what I've learned here, especially in poetry. I have a question for Chris. Does he think that editing is necessary in poetry? Maybe that's a topic for next session.
Oh my God, poetry and editing, more important. You don't have as much space to do the same thing. It's, oh, wow, yes.
So here you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The next topic for Piton Noire's workshops will be poetry and editing. So I'm committing you guys to doing more of these workshops as we work to educate the public on the importance of writing. Geoffrey, did you have any final words?
No, well, just job well done, and I hope to see everyone and probably anyone else at the next session. It was really interesting and worth my time.
Yes, absolutely. So again, thank you everyone for being here with us as we presented Piton Noire's workshop of showing and not telling for the 2021 Dominica Writers Festival. It was a pleasure being your host. I'm Simone Mathieu, and I look forward to seeing many more presentations such as this from Piton Noire. And of course, we cannot leave without saying how we can get in touch with Piton Noire and your website, Nicole.
So if you would like to get your own copy of the Flying Crapaud Anthology, you can visit our website at theflyingcrapaud.com. We're also available in ebook format and paperback format on amazon.com. If you'd like to email us, you can reach us at pitonnoire1@gmail.com. That's pitonnoire1@gmail.com. Or you can check us out on Facebook, just Piton Noire, and you can message us via Facebook Messenger, and we'd be happy to hear from you if you'd like to join. We are very inclusive. You do not have to necessarily be a Dominican or from the Caribbean to join Piton Noire. We're open to creative writers from all backgrounds, and we just ask that you come with your imagination and that you have a love or an interest in the Caribbean basin. So everyone's welcome.
Yes, excellent. And of course, Piton Noire is spelled Pitonnoire, just to make sure you get the spelling absolutely correct, so you don't miss an opportunity to connect with the group. So again, thank you for being here. And this has been a wonderful presentation. And I hope that we gained a lot of value from this information that was shared today. So you have yourself a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Simone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.